Hello, everyone. My name is Rajiv Ramdad. I currently serve as program co-chair for the Higher Education TIG along with Kevin Keene. And we are so excited today to welcome our TIG chair, Nidhi. We've worked with her for almost 3 years at this point, and it's just been incredible in order to learn from her. She has over 15 years experience in evaluation, primarily utilizing it within the higher education sphere, helping to provide opportunities and a deeper understanding of some of the challenges that undergraduate students are facing, and also utilizing that knowledge in order to really help us better understand how we can better support and serve them. Her topic today is exploring Microsoft Copilot for open text analysis. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Nidhi.
Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. And I think, Rajiv, you already said, right, that it's being recorded from here on, right? So everyone is aware, yeah. Okay. Um, I'm really glad to be here, but just a disclaimer at the very beginning that I'm no expert on this topic. I started playing around with this few months ago, and I thought it might be fun to share my experience with everyone and equally important to learn from all of you. So it's really in that vein that, I'm approaching this particular session. So, first off, I think I've mentioned the motivation already, but here is a kind of very brief outline of the agenda. Um, I'll talk about why I'm here, which I think I've already done. Then I'll talk about why Copilot. What motivated me to start, messing around with Copilot. And then, based on my limited experience, what I've learned about the pros and cons of using Copilot for open text analysis. And then again, some mitigation strategies that have helped, that have kind of worked for me. And finally, I'll conclude with a brief recommendation. And really, I want to leave time for Q&A, and I want to leave time to learn from your experience. Time permitting, I will give you an example where I've used Copilot to some extent, it's served my purposes. But what I've done is I've simulated data because I could not use the open text data that we've collected through our survey. So I kind of created a dummy data set that I could use. If there's time, then I could show you that example. So, like I said, my motivation really was to share my experience, to warn you about some of the pitfalls that I've faced, and to discuss, why I still think it's a good idea, so some of the potential benefits. And I would absolutely love to learn from your experience. If any of you have, any experience using AI for open text analysis, it needn't be Copilot, but any kind of, experience with using AI, I would really urge you to share with everyone. So, why Copilot? For me, it was very simple. This is the one that's university approved. So, the university has a contract with Microsoft for this, which means that we have some additional layers of security. So, that's why I kind of started, experimenting with Copilot. And of course, the real motivation is that I have years and years of untapped open text survey data, which I feel really terrible about that I have not been able to mine it much. The quantitative data that we collect, it's relatively easier to put that into customized reports. But the open text data, I'm kind of a little apprehensive sharing it with a wider group because when students respond to open text questions, sometimes they may put things there that may identify them or specific professors, or it could be sensitive data in many ways. So it's really important that we keep students confidential, which because it's open text can be a little bit trickier. With quantitative data, we suppress small cell sizes, right? But here, unless you look at each and every response, it may be difficult. And when you're collecting data from thousands of students every year, like I do, it becomes hard to look at each and every response in order to see whether there could be anything sensitive in it. Equally important, when you have thousands of responses, it's kind of hard to analyze them in a rigorous and systematic manner. I've I've used NVivo in the past, I've used MaxQDA, but they're all highly labor intensive. And to get inter-rater reliability, you need to have, some other people working with you. So it takes away a lot from the autonomy. And of course, it's very expensive and very time consuming to do a, really good systematic analysis. So one was also to give myself some more autonomy over, being able to say something confidently and something meaningful about these responses. And of course, I was very curious. I hadn't really, I don't have much experience with KI. I somehow never got into that bandwagon initially. But of late, I've really felt curious to see, what's in it for me. So the pros, okay, so here's what I did. I asked Copilot to create me a PowerPoint that gives me the pros and cons of using Copilot. And it gave me something, but it was far from comprehensive, and it was not, I may have used a few bullet points from there, but really it was not customized to kind of my needs. I think someone is trying to get in. Okay. So for me, really, the pros have been that already in the last month that I've been using this a little more intensively, it's allowed me to make sense of, these large volumes of open text data that I've collected over years. And with that, obviously, it goes the money and the time savings. It's very quickly able to detect patterns and trends from, again, really what I do is I create an Excel file with the open text responses. I scrub it of all the student IDs, and I remove all specific references, and I upload that file into Copilot, and then I ask it to, do various things for me. It requires a lot of tweaking. It requires a lot of iterations, but I found that it has still yielded me information that would have been very hard for me to accomplish in that period of time. So quick summaries, executive reports, even some other deliverables I've created that I'll show you, which I think I was not expecting Copilot to do such a good job, but it's kind of, gotten further than I thought it would be. The other thing I like about Copilot, and I'm sure it's true for most other AI, platforms as well, is while you're interacting with it, it will give you prompts. Do you want this? Do you want to see it? Do you want to see a visual? Do you want? And I find that extremely helpful because no, I may not want exactly what it's asking me, but I can tweak it and then say, yes, but I would like a pie chart. Yes, but instead of frequencies or in addition to frequencies, can you provide me percentages? Can you use the number of respondents as a denominator rather than the number of responses? So I'm able to, work with those prompts and then, edit it to where it works for me. In the absence of any prompt, it's kind of hard to come up with things. I don't even know what it can do. At least initially I didn't. So I find those prompts extremely helpful to take my analysis further. Also, it provides pretty seamless integration with all kinds of visualization and reporting tools. It can raise accuracy, I say, because initially at least, I find that it gives you a lot of inaccurate information. Same thing with consistency. It can raise consistency because it uses the same logic model. So unlike humans, once it's come up with a model that it wants to use, it will use it somewhat consistently. However, that model itself may be flawed. So at the front end, it requires a lot of time. But potentially, it could are doing it, they're sleepy, they've had a bad day, who knows? It can change how they are coding certain things. But, hopefully with if you're using an algorithm, it can be a little more consistent. It avoids human dependent bias. I say human dependent because it adds its own model dependent bias, right? We all know that it uses training data in order to do these kinds of analysis. And if that training data is biased, which we have reason to believe in many cases it is, then obviously it's going to transfer that bias into our analysis. It's scalable. Once you've put in time at the front end, I find that adding more, let's say for one particular year, I put in a lot of time and came up with the right codes, comprehensive set of codes with some help from Copilot. Once I've accomplished it, then adding additional years of data becomes much easier. Of course, it doesn't mean you totally leave it to AI as well. You still need to kind of, make sure that there's a human in the loop, as they say. The other thing which I didn't know, and probably many of you might know, but I was new to it, is that if you ask Copilot to provide you the underlying codes, the Python codes that it's using, it will provide it. And that really raises transparency because once you have those codes, you can see exactly what steps it took to give you the final analysis that it did. So I find even if, I'm not a Python coder, but even so, getting that code really helps me understand what it was doing. And finally, it'll allow you to quickly translate everything into any language. So one of the deliverables I asked for was to create an email for students based on these findings. And just for fun of it, I said, can you translate it in Hindi? And I was amazed. It did an incredible job. It was all grammatically correct because I understand Hindi, but it was very formal. So I said, okay, can you make it informal? And it did. It made it very warm and personable. The thing is, you have to give very, very detailed and specific prompts. So the cons, some of the pros you will also see in the cons. It can be very inconsistent. I find that if I start a new chat and I feed the same Excel file, it can come up with different themes and different frequencies. And then you have to ask, why is it that in a previous chat I got this? And then it may say, oh, because I was using each quotation to link to one code. Do you want me to use multiple codes for each response? And then you say yes. And then it will do something. And then, of course, you need to have looked at the quotations, many of them, I would say 50 or 100 of them, which is what I do. Like you need to have had a quick look. And then I was like, why haven't you used communication as a code? Because many students seem to be talking about it. And then it'll say, oh, because nobody used the word communication. Do you want me to do a more nuanced analysis so that I can pick up on things that, touch upon communication? So it's very iterative, but that's why in the front end, it takes a while. But like I said, over time, I still find that it's much more efficient than my having to do this with some of my colleagues, together. So algorithms are helpful because they keep things consistent, but because it overly relies on algorithms, it can also miss out on some things. Like some of the more ambiguous responses or some of the more sarcastic responses, sometimes it cannot catch them. And same thing with contextual information. If it doesn't know the context, it cannot contextualize. So I found that providing those things is very helpful. So now, in addition to the responses, if you provide some demographic variables, if you provide with school and so on, one, you can get more meaningful insights because it will be able to see patterns along all of these dimensions. Keep in mind, it may add its bias as well. So one trick is to ask for these insights without giving, say, information on whether the student was first gen or not first gen with school and so on. And then you can compare to see whether you do see a big difference in how it's coding things once it knows some, background characteristics. I've already touched upon how it's, dependent on the training data for the types of biases it could potentially introduce in the analysis. Data privacy and consent. That's a really big one because at least all our surveys, we tell students, we go through IRB, there is a consent form, and we only use data when we have explicit consent. But even so, like I said, with open text responses, data privacy becomes even more, salient. So to the extent Copilot has a contract with our university and we have approval to use that, I feel comfortable. But even so, I do scrub all student identifiers before I will upload a file into any AI tool. And I strongly recommend that we do that because we don't know what happens in the black box. It's not very clear, at least to me. And like I've said before, it needs a lot of time at the front end to get to the point where you're comfortable with the themes or codes that it's using. And it still needs constant review because otherwise it will keep replicating the error over and over again. I think I've already touched on some of the mitigation strategies that I've been employing, but maybe just to reiterate some of them, remove all identifying information, even your university name or anything, because I don't know where it goes. And at least, I mean, for Copilot, I do, but I don't know if all of you have access to AI tools that have been vetted by, your university, or you have added levels of security. The other thing is to provide specific and very detailed prompts. Otherwise, you will not get very meaningful. And I'll give examples of that if we have time at the end. The other thing is to repeat analysis with new chat. Start a new chat, give the same file. It's a bit like getting some level of iterator reliability, by using AI tool with a new chat. And over time, let's say that you feel, based on your read of many of the responses, that it's missing some important categories or it's combining categories that should not be. Like I found it had once combined academic resources and advising. And I was like, no, I want them separated out. So it will separate it out for you. So, and I always ask it to create an other category so that it doesn't force responses into one theme or the other. That if there is any lack of clarity, they can go under other. So once you've done all that, you've gone through that iteration and you're happy with the final set of codes you've got, then next chat, you can say, these are the themes and codes I want you to use, create a table, frequency table with these. And again, like I said, start new chats and make sure that those frequencies match. And if they don't, ask, why is it that it's not matching? Or why did you, let's say there's a particular response for, faculty interaction. Ask for specific codes. Give me codes why you put this, why you coded it like this. And that gives you an opportunity to make sure, at least do some kind of random checks to see that you're comfortable with the way it's coding those responses. Because like I said, it will miss out on sarcasm, it will miss out on ambiguity and things like that. The other thing I've found is it really helps to break a project into subtasks, because then you can be more specific, right? You can ask, instead of just saying, give me a visualization, you can say, okay, first step, you've ended up with the codes that you like, right? That you're comfortable with. Then you can say, can you create a pie chart or a bar chart? And then you can say, change the color scheme. Then you can just focus on that and kind of get a polished chart by asking it to keep tweaking things. Let me warn you though, every once in a while it'll give up. It'll say, it'll just abruptly end the chat and say, we can't have, you need to start a new conversation. So what I do is, and it'll save it too, I keep my transcripts and a Copilot saves it as well, but I don't know how it works with all AI tools. So I would strongly recommend that you just keep the transcripts of what you've done so you can build from there in case it does abruptly, kick you out. And do ask lots of questions to understand the logic. Why did you code it like this? Why do you think this is an actionable recommendation? Why do you think this is more important? Just because I often ask Copilot to give me a list of actionable recommendations in order of priority. And then I can follow it up by asking, why did you think this was more important? So just trying to understand, what's the thinking behind what it is doing, I find it extremely helpful. And of course, always ask for keywords and phrases it used to identify themes. Because that way you can see if some things are being put in the wrong bucket. And the good thing is it will provide those to you. It will tell you what keywords. You can also see the keywords. If you ask for the Python code, you'll be able to see what were the codes, what were the words or phrases that were used to, identify something as falling under a particular theme. Ask for outliers, and it'll tell you what, and ask them, why do you think this is an outlier? Like I found pretty good information. It said these were the outlying responses because these were very long, they gave a lot of detailed information, or they were very emotionally charged. It'll give you the rationale behind why it thought something was an outlier. And as any of us who've dealt with data know, outliers are sometimes very critical to really understanding, making sense of the data as much as, representative quotations are. I've already mentioned that it can give you, the codes. And again, mitigation strategy, keep human in the loop at every step. Make sure that, every time you get an output from AI, you look at it, it makes sense to you before you move. And if it doesn't make sense, keep asking why. Why did you do it like this? And sometimes you may agree, sometimes you may disagree and say, no, I would rather you did it this way. I would rather you classified it this way. Or break this into two themes, or combine those two themes into one. Conclusion. Copilot, still feel, based on my very, very exploratory experience with it, that I think it can be a powerful tool for analyzing open text survey data. There are still significant gaps, not all of which can be filled, bridged through the mitigation strategies that I've mentioned. There are still ethical issues, methodological issues that I think remain. And as we know, this is a very evolving field. People are still, as we speak, it's changing by the day. So yes, I think it's good as a hybrid thing to augment but not to replace human judgment. But with that caveat, I still think that it can save a lot of time. So that was my quick spiel, and I would love to learn from everyone. And if there's time, I'll be happy to get into an example.
Thank you so much for that amazing presentation, Nidhi. I think we're going to go ahead and stop the recording now and open it up for the Q&A.